Welcome. We want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join this webinar on the benefits of pre-planning funeral arrangements. Just a couple of housekeeping items as we begin. Somewhere on your screen, if you touch your screen, there should be a Q&A widget or a chat widget. Either one of these will allow you to potentially ask questions if you have them during this seminar. If you stay to the end, there's some additional information that we will provide. At this time, we're going to give our attention to Jamie Allar as she walks us through the simple steps to advanced planning.
Well, welcome everyone, and I'm honored that you've chosen to join us today. Again, my name is Jamie Allar. I'm with the Pisarski Funeral Home, and my job for the past 14 years or so has been solely focused on helping folks like you get their ducks in a row and make their funeral arrangements ahead of time. It's something that will affect every single person, yet it's something that most people have some difficulty discussing. And as my title suggests, our goal is to make this very simple for you because it's so important to address it and prepare for it, not just for you, but especially for the people you love. And we never know when they will need this. So today is really the best day to get it done because we don't know how many tomorrows any of us have left. So hopefully today our time together will help you get started and help make this easier for everyone involved. So when we consider the most significant events in our life that we will plan and prepare for, things like getting married, the birth of children, the birth of grandchildren, education, and paying for retirement, we rarely just let these things happen without thoughtful planning. And just like other major life events, funerals require planning too. An estimated 34% of people over age 50 have pre-planned a funeral for themselves or someone they love. We see these numbers growing each year as consumers have become more aware that this can and should be done ahead of time. When we look at results from a survey conducted, over 90% of people agree that pre-planning is a good idea. So the question really isn't why should I pre-plan, but rather why wouldn't I? And the key reasons people share with us for why pre-planning is important. First, to lift the burden for their loved ones, both emotionally and financially. The second reason is to ensure that things go the way you want them to, which is really what your family wants. And then to honor you by carrying out your wishes. Finally, for peace of mind, knowing that you've done all you can for those that you love. People often ask, how much does a funeral cost these days? And while the National Funeral Directors Association tells us the average cost nationally is about $7,000, this typically only covers the funeral home services and a casket or an urn. It doesn't usually take into account what we refer to as cash advance items. Cash advance items contribute to the overall funeral expense, but these costs aren't set by a funeral home. Some of these outside items include cemetery costs, like the cost of the plot or to open and close the grave, a headstone, engraving on the headstone, obituary notices, a funeral meal, flower display pieces, honorariums for clergy and musicians, and death certificates are a few items. A simple cremation may start around $3,000, while a traditional full-service burial funeral can reach close to $20,000. Funeral costs are typically rising on average about 4 to 5% each year. This means today's prices could be double in about 14 years. So having a plan to address the cost is important to eliminate an unexpected financial strain for someone else. So when you're considering what type of service will work best for you and your loved ones, we'll look at some of the basic options. It is important to know that there really are no rules or one size fits all. When we use the term funeral, this typically refers to a formal service based on religious or cultural traditions. The body is present in most cases, and because the body is present, funerals generally take place within a few days following death, before burial or cremation takes place. So typically a funeral can take place at a church, a graveside, a funeral home, or even at someone's home. And while a memorial service is typically held without a body present, it can be scheduled days, weeks, or even months after the death occurs, and that allows time for family and friends to gather. In fact, as some of you may have heard about recently during this pandemic, many families have opted to delay their services as they're currently being limited to just 10 people at a time. A memorial service can be elaborate or simple. It can be held anywhere, at a home, park, graveside, at a church, or at a funeral home. And if you're looking for some unique ideas, I encourage you to take advantage of the free personal session that we offer. We'll be talking more about that at the end of the presentation today. One of my favorite ideas for a memorial service was for a gentleman who was a self-described sweet tooth, and we decided to have an ice cream social for his memorial service. We even decided to include signage that said, "Life is short, eat dessert first." And then also we included floral arrangements that were actually in ice cream containers. So it kind of brought the whole theme together. So some additional options where you can personalize a service include military honors for our veterans, a butterfly or dove release, photo displays or a video tribute. We can do a fundraiser for your favorite charitable organization. You can have a meal hosted or a reception hosted at a favorite gathering place, or even just having a favorite food item served at the meal. I worked with a couple recently who pre-planned for their favorite bakery to provide lefse for their meal. And that was a favorite family tradition of theirs. So just a little bit of brainstorming can result in some great ideas to make your event special and personalized. And we're here to help with this. When considering a service or a gathering, it is important to remember that this is going to be a gift for the people who need to grieve their loss and honor your life. I hear people say, "I don't want a funeral." And oftentimes that's code for, "I don't want people to make a fuss over me." And that's human nature. But it is important to remember that this is for the living. It's a basic human need for us to honor our loved ones who go before us. And when we lose someone we love, ceremony is an important component of that healing process. And it's a way to reconcile and accept the loss. So remember that funerals truly are for the living when planning your own service. There's also the option for those who want to plan a very basic direct burial or cremation. Just know that anything you plan ahead of time will provide much needed direction when the time comes. And you can always add to or change your arrangements at any time. So once you have an idea of what type of arrangements would best accommodate you and your family's needs, a cost estimate will be provided, and this information will be important when considering your funding options. An important question to ask is, if something happened to you tomorrow, how would your funeral expenses be paid? And for some, personal savings may be the first thought, but for long-term planning, the potential for encountering expensive long-term care costs does pose a risk to those savings. In addition, a surviving spouse might need to rely on savings to supplement their lost income. So when we rely on other family members or friends to pay funeral expenses, there's a risk that they could not only overspend emotionally, Many people aren't aware that oftentimes when death occurs, assets that are passed to the kids are frozen during probate, which can mean family is left to cover the bill before your funds are accessible. Sometimes that can be many months. Borrowing from family and friends might be an option, but asking for help can carry a heavy emotional burden. A family member might use a credit card or take out a loan, but there's interest charges to consider. Not many people want to pass along a debt to their family as a goodbye. So another thought that you might have is, I have life insurance. Life insurance is a wonderful option for passing a tax-free gift to survivors. It allows loved ones to maintain their standard of living after a death, and funeral expenses are generally due and payable at the time of arrangements. Life insurance generally takes weeks to process if all goes well. And again, that can leave family to have to cover some of those expenses out of pocket until their claim is settled. And by the way, in cases where a death certificate is delayed in obtaining a death certificate, it also will delay the timing of funds. And in cases of an accidental death or an autopsy investigation, it's pretty common to see weeks or even months of delay in receiving those death certificates. So everything is tied up with those death certificates before matters can get settled. And also for long-term planning, life insurance with cash value is considered an available asset for long-term care. In other words, just like your other savings, most policies are not protected from creditors like the nursing home. Fortunately, there is an alternative to allow you to avoid the pitfalls I just mentioned. You can choose to arrange payment in advance with a specially designed funeral insurance policy, and it's held in an irrevocable funeral trust. You might be familiar with that term. Once you've determined what your funeral needs will be, a policy is taken out for the amount needed to cover those anticipated expenses. Everyone qualifies, and the death benefit grows over time, which helps to offset price increases. At the time of death, your funeral provider can access the death benefit directly. A feature of this policy that offers protection that other policies do not is the irrevocable trust designation. This means that the policy remains intact and available only for the payment of these final expenses. So as I once heard someone put it, it cannot be accessed by creditors, predators, and nursing homes. So to summarize, why should you take care of the expense ahead of time? Why not let somebody else worry about it? Well, maybe you're thinking, I have plenty of money for the kids to handle it. Well, first, you're giving yourself the option to make customized payments on your terms. When a funeral is not funded ahead of time, the full amount is due and payable in a few days. In fact, many funeral homes expect their payment in full before the day of the service. This can add a lot of stress to an already stressful time for a family. So the funding piece is really relieving a huge burden for your loved ones. A funeral home will file the claim and receives the payment directly. And if there's any unused funds, they are returned to your estate. Another reason to fund ahead is to ensure that funds will be available for these final expenses no matter what might happen as the end of life approaches. Many families encounter medical issues that require long-term care, and having a pre-funded funeral policy is safe because it's held in that irrevocable burial trust. Of course, what peace of mind to not have to worry about how your family will cope with all those decisions that have to be made quickly at the time of death. You're getting it all in order for them. And this is where I really assist people. 3 simple steps to achieving that peace of mind. First, we organize documents that will be necessary. Just like other important documents like power of attorney, wills, or maybe you have a trust, your funeral plan should include some important documents prepared as well. In addition to mapping out your detailed final wishes, we can include an authorization for final disposition form. This ensures that someone is in charge of executing all aspects of your final arrangements. For example, who gets the urn? When will the service take place? Who can or shouldn't attend the family's final viewing? Appointing someone in charge of what happens to your remains and final arrangements is not legally addressed with a power of attorney or by an executor. So this can be an important peacekeeping document for those families that have the potential for disagreement. And let's face it, many families with rifts never thought they'd be that family before the rift. It's often in an emotional time like the loss of a loved one where we see those emotions high, and oftentimes some disagreement can occur. So we also create an outline for the obituary and death certificates for your file. And lastly, your family will never have to call an insurance company to start a claim or worry about juggling funds to pay for the funeral. It's all taken care of. Planning ahead is really a gift for those that you're leaving behind. And as I'm sure nearly everyone here can attest, when someone we love dies, those emotions are raw, and tensions can exist even in the best relationships. This allows families to focus on their healing process and be confident knowing they're following your wishes. And you get to achieve peace of mind knowing that you've done all you can to make a tough transitional period a little easier for them. We guide you through that 3-step process. So where do you go from here? Well, hopefully you'll be inspired today to take action. And we'd like to offer you an opportunity to put some of the things you've learned today to work for you and your family. You'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link where you can sign up for a one-on-one Zoom meeting. This is a nice way to include family members if they maybe live out of the area, but you'd like to include them and get their thoughts on things. We can also extend an invitation for them to share in this conversation. With that, I'd like to turn it back to Andy and ask if we have any questions that have come up that we can answer for folks.
The only question that's arisen, Jamie, is what happens if the funeral home goes out of business or I move and want to use a different funeral home?
So that's a great question. Because your plan is portable, that can be moved at any time. If a funeral home were to go out of business, you simply would transfer your plan to another funeral home. This remains in your control. So again, if any changes need to be made to your service requests or to even what funeral home provides the service, that's always a change that can be made. So that's a great question that comes up. Were there any others that came up?
That was the only question at this point.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone again for attending and taking the time to address this and approach this for your family. I look forward to working with you one-on-one and offering you a plan that works for you and your loved ones as well.
Thank you very much for the day, and thank you, Jamie.